any story you do which is in the news, somebody is going to be upset by. And it's not just in the news. If you happen to have had your poodle run over that day, and we do a story about poodles being run over, it's not funny to you. That is the thing. You can't just do it on one person. You have to do it on how the thing's being seen. Well, we had in England a few years ago, it seems to be an annual event now, because it did so well on television, flooding. And flooding happened all through the south of England. And we didn't know what to do because there were people being flooded out of their homes. There was no other news, so we had to do that. There was just literally no other news. All the other news had been washed away. So all we were able to do was do stuff. So we thought we'd try and do it on the coverage of the news rather than the houses being flooded. And we did get a lot of complaints. And one woman in particular had written this thing saying, we came back to our house and it's full of water and we're ruining everything and I'll never watch your program again and you're all heartless bastards. And I felt really bad, so I called her up and I said, look, the last thing we wanted to do was upset you because we had to do something. We were not laughing at you, we were laughing at the coverage of it. Would you like to come and see the show? And she said, oh, I'd love that, that would be great. And she said, Frank, are we free next week? Yeah, we are, because we have no home anymore, so we'll come along and see the show.
We once had a whole show with Hack Rabin, and that was about 5 years after he was murdered. And it was very successful, and people were very ambiguous about it, and they didn't know how to feel, because on one hand, it was very funny, and he had very sharp answers, because we cut it all from another show, of course. But on the other hand, it was very sentimental, and it was very controversial, but it was very interesting, because it really brought his presence like nothing else can do. And it's something that I suggest anybody would try if you have a murdered prime minister.
It was quite a long time ago, but he was quite a large politician, and he just didn't turn up. And the producers at the time thought, well, we could book somebody. We could probably ring somebody at the last minute and get somebody to come in. But then they decided not to, so they decided that the best way to deal with it was just to have a tub of lard, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with that expression. You can call somebody who's overweight, in the old days, we wouldn't do it now. You could call them, they're like a tub of lard. So they had a tub of lard sitting with one of the panelists, and they asked him questions and he didn't answer much, so they filled in.
I was going to add, we had a similar story, an interview. He didn't show up one time and we covered it in different ways. And there was a guy named Al Sharpton who was booked to be our guest, and he just didn't show up. We couldn't get in touch with him. We had no idea where he was. So Stephen just said, I'll be Al Sharpton. And this is online, it's worth looking up. And John just, without tipping to the audience, this is what's going to happen. He just said, please welcome Al Sharpton. And Stephen walked out and proceeded to do the interview straight in character, saying all the things that Al Sharpton would have said, and it was perfect. And like an early indication of, can Stephen do a whole show in character? He could do a whole show in any number of characters. Yeah.
From one day to another, you can miss a war. And we have at least once or twice really reshot, because we just couldn't ignore whatever happened between the shooting and the broadcast.
You reshot the show, or you reshot the
we
war?
shot, no, well, you can
and you're speaking of the passion that drives a lot of people, and something that sometimes happens with us, and especially if we're working on a very short notice, is that we fail to take the passion and often the anger that is at the bottom of what we want to do and process it into humor enough. One of the things that we can sometimes regret is if we just express the anger in a more naked way. It comes out sometimes rather than really making a good joke out of it. And it can feel cathartic in the moment, but I usually feel afterwards like, it wasn't quite our show. It might have been true and it might have been sort of accurate to the moment, but it wasn't quite our show. There are exceptions to that as well, where it actually is the right thing to do, but like that's in 3 times in 12 years or something.
Religion and comedy, let's talk about that for a second.
You made that joke about a priest, you wouldn't make that joke about an imam, and we wouldn't, for various reasons, but it does come back to stuff that people were talking about yesterday, is that you don't punch down, you punch up. And in the UK, the Muslims are a minority, and therefore it's not fair.
We have this saying that in satire you have two limits. One is this time you've gone too far. The other side is you have no balls.